We went for a drive out through the country this weekend to pick up a hutch or china cabinet that I won on an online auction. And the scenery out by this auction house has totally inspired me to give this thing a charming little farmhouse or cottage-core style makeover. So I stumbled across this little cabinet on an online auction site, placed a bid of $20 on a whim since there was only one picture and no description, and won it. It turned out to be a lot smaller than I'd imagined, but once we got it home and I took a closer look at it, I realized that it really is the perfect piece for paint. It's definitely not a valuable antique or made with any pretty wood grains. It's all homemade with hardware store birch plywood and edge banding and a bit of a drippy and uneven polyurethane finish brushed over top. But I absolutely love the shape and sort of primitive feeling design of it. So I want to do my own interpretation of a little display piece that will fit into a cozy cottage or simple country farmhouse type space, and hopefully turn it from something that nobody wanted at the auction into something that someone wants to put into their living room, dining room, or it would even make a great piece for extra kitchen storage too. If you've been here before, then you already know the drill. The first step is to clean every surface with a heavy-duty degreaser. I really like Simple Green. And this is going to remove any old furniture polish or wax residue so it doesn't end up getting ground down into the wood with my sander later on. These round knobs are adorable, but I think they must just be glued on because there are no screws or nails through the back, so I'll have to leave them where they are and just work around them. Luckily, this piece is really lightweight, so I was able to easily lift it up and just pop it onto my workbench so I could clean the cobwebs off the bottom too. It's always a good idea to get a look at your work from this angle too, so that you know it's nice, neat, and clean, and you don't have to worry about customers potentially finding any surprises when you're helping them load a new piece into their car. There were a few finishing nails around the frames that were just barely flush with the surface, so I grabbed my nail set and hammer to give them all a little tap down just under the surface so I could fill in the holes and they won't be visible in my new paint job. And I used this Timbermate filler for the first time to fill this in. I really like this stuff. Once all that was dry, I put on my dust mask and stuck some 180 grit sandpaper onto my detail sander so that I could smooth out the excess filler and a few drips that I found in the polyurethane, as well as just scuff up the rest of the surfaces to give my primer some really good texture to grab onto. I don't think this piece was built too long ago, or at least it hasn't been used much, because it really doesn't have any of the typical scratches or dents that you see on furniture that might need to be buffed out. So this sanding process was really quick and easy. And to go over the detailed trim around the top, I switched to this squishy foam abrasive pad from Surf Prep that just molds itself around those curves like magic. I used my damp cloth to pick up all the really fine sanding dust, and then laid out a bit of paper and some plinths to raise the doors up off my table so that I could get some primer onto them without getting them stuck to the table. This shellac-based primer is my favorite, even though it's a little bit of a pain to deal with, but it bonds to pretty much any surface like glue, seals in stains or odors from leaching up through a new finish, and creates a really nice, even base layer for paints to sit on top of. The shellac does like to separate out of the white base, so you do always need to give it a really good stir to reincorporate things before you use it. And I like to line a little roller tray with some tin foil for easy cleanup, and just use a cheap roller from the dollar store to apply it with. It sticks a little too well to the metal on the inside of my spray gun, and it does not like water. Like, it seizes up into this weird cottage cheese mixture if it comes in contact with a single drop of water. And since I mainly use water-based products in my sprayer, there's always a good possibility that there's a little bit of water left in the gun after I wash it out. Anywho, that's why I don't spray it. But I didn't see any signs of stain popping through, so I think one coat will do what I need it to. But this bright white does also help highlight smaller imperfections that you can't really see in a wood finish, like these little gaps where the edge banding meets the plywood. So I used the same filler to fix all of the seams that I could see that were standing out, and then sanded everything smooth with some 400 grit sandpaper and wiped off all the dust again with another microfiber cloth. I put down a piece of paper to help contain the paint mess that I was about to make, although I'm really not sure why I try anymore, because the floor out here is completely covered in about 60 different colors of paint already. But I also popped some old paint cans underneath the legs to get the whole unit up off the floor so I could get around the legs a little bit easier with my paint sprayer. I knew that I wanted to brighten up the inside of this cabinet to an off-white, so I ended up just mixing a few different leftover shades of Fusion Mineral Paint together to get enough to cover what I needed, and strained about half of a pint through a paint filter into my pneumatic sprayer, and added about 2 tablespoons of water to thin it out just a bit. Since spraying atomizes the paint into really fine particles, you always need to wear a respirator so that you're not breathing all that in. And the gun that I'm using needs the pressure from the air compressor that powers it to be about 40 psi. So I checked that, pulled out enough hose to get around everything, and hooked up my gun. I always like to do a little test spray on a piece of cardboard to make sure that the right amount of paint is coming out, and then I can move over to the furniture piece without any surprises. This paint is dry enough to be recoated after about 2 hours, and since I couldn't quite reach everything on the inside of this tight bottom cupboard with my sprayer, I just used a roller to make sure everything got coated well. With the second coat of paint on the inside done and dry, I grabbed some painter's tape and paper to start masking it all off so I could spray my second color on the rest of the cabinet and keep everything neat and tidy. I feel like I haven't painted anything green for a while, and I really love this newer shade from Fusion called Acadia Pear, so it's going to be the main color on here. And same as the white, I filtered about half of the pint into my cleaned out gun, added about 2 tablespoons of water, and got to work spraying a coat over the insides of the doors, the rest of the cabinet, and apparently my wall and the window behind the cabinet too. I guess I should have pulled things a little further out from the wall. Whoops. Fusion is an acrylic-based paint with a built-in resin top coat that's designed specifically to work really well on furniture surfaces like this. It's got a nice matte finish to it, but it's UV and water resistant once it's fully cured, and it can be top coated with one of their top coats or really any water-based top coat product if you want to add some extra protection on top or just change the sheen of it. Since it's pretty chilly in my garage right now and I just have a little space heater going up in the corner, I also set up my box fan to keep the warm air moving and help things dry properly overnight. And the next morning I came back out to keep painting. The coverage on the inside of the doors looked really great and solid, so I flipped them over and just put some paper towels down on top of the plinth so they couldn't stick to the fresh paint at all. There were still some patchy spots on the rest of the hutch though, which the second coat will fill in perfectly. So I sanded all of the green lightly again with my 400 grit just to smooth out any texture or little bits of dust that had dried in there, wiped off the dust again, and sprayed on the second coat. Once all the paint was fully dry, I peeled back the masking, and I had a few little spots that needed touch up, so I fixed those with a little artist brush. And then I was ready to seal everything up with some water-based polyurethane. Like I said, this paint is great as is, but I wanted more of a satin finish, which also makes it a little easier to dust or wipe down and give myself the extra reassurance that this paint is gonna last for a really long time in its new home. After giving the can a good stir, again, to get all the different components in there mixed up nicely, I poured it through another filter, and this is why we strain our products, because a little clump like this can clog your gun and totally mess up your smooth sprayed finish. But I tested out the spray again to make sure that the right amount of product was coming through the nozzle, and then sprayed on a layer over each component. Inside, outside, doors, and shelves. Just like the paint, the stuff can be recoated after 2 hours. So the dried poly got another smooth out, another dust off, and another coat sprayed right over top. I did completely forget to top coat these little door widgets before I cleaned the excess poly out of my sprayer though. So I just went over those with my little baby brush, and then I was finally ready to start pulling this back together. I do need to tell you that I spent a lot of time thinking about adding some hand-painted folk art style designs on here, and even sketched out some stuff using some inspiration pics that I found on Pinterest and some old stencils. But I ultimately decided that as fun as that might be, it would really limit or narrow down the market for this cabinet. Or maybe I just chickened out. I guess we'll never know. I ended up painting the bottom too because you could still see a little bit of the plywood underneath from a few angles, and I added some of these nail-in nylon glides to the bottom of the legs, which should help protect the feet from chipping down the line. Okay, let's go back to the beginning for a second and remind ourselves of where this china cabinet started out. A cute piece of sturdy storage furniture in not such a great color scheme. And here is what it's looking like now. I personally think this pale green and white design is much easier for more people to incorporate into their homes than the orange plywood look was. And I don't think I'm going to have any issues finding this piece a deserving new home in the rural farming community that I live in. It took me 2 days worth of work and about $60 in materials between primer, paint, and top coat to complete this one. And with the $20 buy-in cost, bringing that up to $80, I think this piece could easily sell in my market for anywhere between $350 and $400. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed following along with me through this project. I need to go dive right into the next one now, so I will catch you all next time.